The number 24. There are 24 hours in a day, 24 carats and 100% pure gold, 24 calories and a healthy serving of cantaloupe. Obviously, 24 is a number of greatness. But you know the greatest thing in this country? The greatness of the American democracy. One thing we learned through our time spent with legends: you can't stop greatness. More specifically, you can't stop the greatness of the American democracy. Let me introduce you to the 24th Amendment, among the top 5 things to ever represent the number 24. So let me take you back to August 27, 1962. For background, in the late 1800s, Georgia, along with several other southern states, had adopted the poll tax as a requirement for voting. This was part of efforts intended to exclude African Americans from voting by the passage of Jim Crow laws. While most American voters were able to pay the tax, the groups most affected were the poor population and African Americans. By the 1900s, the poll tax was adopted by about 11 states, including the southern states and Texas. Poll taxes were a tax paid for one's right to vote. In order to vote, you must provide evidence that you have paid tax. Sometimes poll taxes were also accompanied by a literacy requirement, which further restricted non-white and uneducated populations from voting in the election. Along with these things, groups of women and African Americans were denied from voting, even if they had paid the tax, while poor white voters who hadn't paid the tax could vote if their grandfather had, under the Grandfather Clause. Fast forward back to August 27, 1962. The issue of disenfranchised African Americans in the South still was a prominent issue. However, Southerners refused to approve the abolition of the poll tax. A bill to abolish the poll tax had been presented to Congress on multiple occasions prior to 1960. However, on August 27, 1962, Congress finally proposed the 24th Amendment, and it had passed in a 2/3 majority vote in House and in Senate. The amendment was to be submitted to the states to be ratified. However, Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Wyoming refused to ratify the amendment, creating a massive division within the country. Eventually, after much debate, ratification was completed on January of 1964. The 24th Amendment read as such. Section 1. The right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors for president or vice president, or for senator or representatives in Congress, shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. Section 2. The Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. This ultimately led to the end of the poll tax and a step towards the ending of the unjust disenfranchisement of American voters. The 24th Amendment ultimately protected American citizens and their rights and opportunity to vote. Democracy is so beautiful, man. It outlawed the poll tax, stating that you could not prevent someone from voting on the basis of an unpaid tax. One of 3 Supreme Court cases which encompassed the 24th Amendment was the Breedlove versus Suttles. This case occurred in 1937, prior to the passage of the 24th Amendment. This case surrounded the argument whether the requirement for a poll tax was constitutional or not. The court ruled that the poll tax requirements were indeed constitutional and were not in violation of the 19th Amendment, as it only applied to gender. However, the case was eventually superseded by Harper versus Virginia Board of Elections in 1966. This case surrounded the same argument, however the outcome had changed. The court ruled that Virginia's poll tax for state elections was unconstitutional under the 14th and 24th Amendment. This ruling established further that poll taxes were unconstitutional, both on the national and federal election stage. This ruling was groundbreaking and another nail in the coffin of the poll tax and the disenfranchisement era. These 2 cases were the most vital in the history of the 24th Amendment. However, another case in 1965 in Harmon versus Forsythe argued over Virginia's substitute to the poll tax. One would have to fill out paperwork and gain a certificate 6 months before an election, provide evidence before voting. The court ruled that these measures were unconstitutional. This concluded that there were to be no substitute to replace the poll tax, whether it be equal or milder. These Supreme Court cases and decisions and the 24th Amendment have developed and reinforced the American democracy and created more just and fair elections for this great country. Today, you do not need to pay a poll tax prior to voting. However, the system of voter registration has been established, although primarily to prevent voter fraud. The 24th Amendment has paved the way for fair, just elections for all American citizens, both on the local and national stage. And once again, goes to show the greatness of the number 24.